In the spring of 1995, a man with $200 to his name walked up to a cash machine in San Francisco. In his hand was a check for $95,093.35. It was fake. He knew it was fake. It had arrived in his junk mail, stamped with the word sample. He fed it into the machine as a joke. So sure it was worthless, he didn't even bother to sign the back. He expected a clerk to find it the next morning and laugh. Instead, 10 days later, $95,000 were sitting in his account. Real money, his money. And when the bank tried to take it back, it discovered something strange. Under its own rules, it couldn't. This is the story of the broke writer who turned a piece of junk mail into a 5-month war with an $11 billion bank and won. His name was Patrick Combs. He was 29, and by almost any measure, he was not doing well. He'd written a book. It wasn't selling. He was living in San Francisco on close to nothing. Money was so tight that he and his girlfriend would split a single ice cream cone. 2 was a luxury. He was, in the language of the self-help books he admired, a man waiting for his break. He just never imagined his break would arrive disguised as junk mail. Because in May of 1995, an envelope landed in his mailbox that looked like every other piece of promotional garbage, and inside it was a check for more money than he'd make in years. The check came from a company called the Association of Certified Liquidators. It was a gimmick, the kind of fake money mailed to tens of millions of Americans to sell a get-rich seminar. Across the front it said, non-negotiable. At the bottom sat the word sample. It was designed to look like real money, just real enough to make you dream, not real enough to spend. But the marketers had made one small, fatal decision. To make it convincing, they printed it on real check stock with a real magnetic ink code along the bottom. That code, the MICR line, is the part no human reads. It's the part the machines read. Those strange little numbers along the bottom of every check are printed in magnetic ink, in a typeface built for one purpose, to be swallowed and understood by a machine at high speed. By the 1990s, American banks moved tens of millions of checks a day. No person could ever look at them all, so almost none of them were looked at by a person at all. The system was built on a simple bargain: trust the code, move the money, sort out the rare mistakes later. And a machine doesn't understand the word sample. A machine only reads the code. The marketers, trying to make their fake check feel real to a human eye, had accidentally made it real to a machine's eye, which was the only eye that mattered. To every automated system in American banking, this piece of junk mail was about to look exactly like a genuine check. Patrick knew none of the legal fine print. He just thought the check was funny. $95,000 sitting in his junk mail, mocking a man who had 200 to his name. So he decided to play a joke. Not on the bank exactly, but on the universe. He'd deposit it, watch it bounce, and keep the rejected check as a souvenir of the day he was almost rich. He walked to a First Interstate Bank ATM, slid the check into the envelope, and fed it into the slot. He was so certain it would be thrown out that he didn't sign the back. An unsigned check should be an automatic rejection. Then he went home and waited for nothing to happen. What happened instead would take 5 months and 6 lawyers to sort out. The next time he checked his balance, the numbers stopped him cold. The $95,000 had landed. The bank had credited every cent. At first, he assumed it was a glitch, a temporary number that would vanish by morning. It didn't vanish. Days passed, then 10, and the money stayed. He began checking his account obsessively, by his own account, every 10 minutes, waiting for it to disappear. It never did. Somewhere in the machinery of a giant bank, a fake check had been read, approved, and paid. Patrick Combs was, on paper, a wealthy man, off a check stamped sample. Here's the part that turned an accident into a legend. The bank had made a mistake, but it was running out of time to fix it. Because American banking runs on a rule called the midnight deadline. When a check reaches the bank that has to pay it, the clock starts. The bank has until roughly midnight of the next business day to say no, pay it, return it, or flag it as bad by the deadline. That is the entire job. Miss the deadline, and the law stops caring whether the check was ever real. The bank becomes accountable for the full amount. Not maybe, not let's discuss it. The money is committed. First Interstate had read the check, paid the check, and let the deadline pass. By the time anyone at the bank realized a sample had slipped through, the window to undo it had already closed. The bank's own system, built for speed, built to move millions of checks without a human touching them, had trapped the bank. Patrick talked to lawyers, 6 of them, and 6 of them told him the same impossible thing. The money might legally be his. Now, most stories like this turn into a story about greed. This one turns the other way. Because Patrick Combs never actually spent $1 of it. And not because he couldn't. For 5 months, a fortune sat one signature away, and lawyers kept telling him it was legally his to take. He thought about it constantly, what it would fix, the book he could finally promote, the years of scraping that would simply end. But every time, the same question stopped him. The money wasn't earned, and it wasn't given. It had slipped through a crack. Keeping it would make the crack his. He didn't buy a car. He didn't run. He did something stranger. He tried to give it back the right way. He converted the balance into a single cashier's check and locked it in a safe deposit box, untouched. He found out the hard way that $95,000 in hundreds won't even fit in a small box. He wanted one simple thing from the bank, for someone to call him, admit the mistake, and ask for it back politely. He said he'd even have settled for lunch with the bank president. What he got instead was a threat. Instead of a polite phone call, a bank security officer accused him of fraud. They threatened him with police, with lawyers, with courts. And that changed everything for Patrick, because now, if he simply handed the money back, he could be admitting to a crime he didn't commit. So he made a decision that flipped the whole story. He refused to return a cent until the bank gave him something in writing clearing his name. It was no longer about the money. It was about not being turned into a criminal for a bank's mistake. And so began a 5-month standoff between one broke writer and one enormous bank. They sent conflicting letters. They served legal papers to stop him cashing the check they'd mistakenly paid him. There was, by some accounts, even a veiled threat frightening enough to rattle him. But Patrick did the one thing a bank never expects from a man. It's trying to intimidate. He wrote everything down, every phone call, every contradiction, every letter that said one thing on Monday and the opposite on Thursday. One letter would demand the money as an overdue debt. The next would call it fraud. A third would treat him as a criminal for depositing a check into his own account at their machine. Each new threat was written to frighten him, but everyone also put the bank on record, and the records didn't agree with each other. Patrick started to notice something almost funny. He was the calmest person in the entire fight. The bank was the one panicking. The bigger the bank leaned on him, the more evidence it handed him of its own confusion. An $11 billion institution was slowly, publicly, losing an argument with a man who had $200. Because Patrick didn't just keep records. He started telling the story. He went on television. He talked to newspapers. The tale spread: a little guy, a giant bank, and a fake check that turned out to be real. The public knew exactly whose side they were on. Everyone who had ever felt small in front of a bank suddenly had a hero. And the bank, which could have ended this with one apologetic phone call, was now the villain in a story the whole country was enjoying. The company that made the check was baffled too. Its president admitted no one had ever even tried to cash one of their fake checks before. Patrick had turned their marketing gimmick into the most famous check in America. After 5 months, it ended not with a verdict, but with a deal. Patrick would return every cent, all $95,000, untouched. In exchange, the bank would sign a settlement admitting the mistakes had been theirs, clearing him of any wrongdoing. He handed over the key to the safe deposit box. He signed the papers, and he walked out with nothing and everything. He later said it plainly: it's hard to give back $95,000 when 6 lawyers have told you it's legally yours. But giving it back, he said, felt wonderful. He'd passed his own test. And here's the twist the bank never saw coming. Patrick Combs walked away from that money, and the money made him anyway. He took the whole absurd saga and turned it into a one-man stage show. He called it Man 1, Bank 0. He performed the real story, with the real documents, on stage night after night to laughing crowds. It became a hit. then a book, then a career. The struggling writer who couldn't sell his work finally had the one thing he'd been missing. A story no one could put down. The fake check was mailed out to sell a get-rich-quick dream to strangers. In the end, it made exactly one person rich, and not with money, but with the story of refusing to keep it. Patrick Combs fed a joke into a machine. The machine, the bank, and the whole system tried to take it back, and the only thing he kept, the only thing he ever wanted to keep, was the truth of what happened. That turned out to be worth more than $95,000.